because as a fifth generation Australian Scottish descent, attending the Presbyterian Church every Sunday, we heard the stories of Daniel and the lion's den. We heard the story of Daniel's 3 friends being thrown into the fiery furnace and not getting burned. Thrilling stories, the best stories that you can ever read to children and for us. But I never heard the story of Daniel chapter 1. I started to discover there's a health message woven all through the Bible. And in Daniel chapter 1, at the age of about 15, Daniel is taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon, the ruler of the known world at that time. And Nebuchadnezzar wanted young men. He wanted the princely ones, the ones of the royal line, to be trained in the schools of Babylon. He wanted to train them so that they could become part of his kingdom. And Daniel and his 3 friends, when they heard that they were chosen and they heard that they could now eat from the king's table, they were a little alarmed because they'd been raised vegetarians. They'd been raised on a plant-based diet. They'd been raised that alcohol is not good. It alters the mind function. And here on the king's table were foods that they did not eat, was the wine. So they went to the prince over them and said, we want to be able to eat vegetables and water to drink. And the prince said, if the king sees you sick because you're not eating from his table, I could lose my head. And Daniel did a wise thing. He said, give us 10 days. Give us 10 days on vegetables and water to drink, and at the end of 10 days, compare us with the other boys. And the Bible says that at the end of 10 days, they were fairer and fatter. That's what the King James Version calls it. In other words, they looked much better than those other boys who were looking a little seedy on this rich food and wine from the king's table. And so Prince Melzer said, okay, you boys can have the vegetables. It says pulse meaning vegetables and water to drink. Anyway, at the end of 3 years, the king tested Daniel and his 3 friends. In fact, the king tested all the young men, and he found Daniel and his 3 friends 10 times smarter than all the wise men in the realm.